Herein lies the fundamental and unresolvable paradox of human rights, a paradox which allows Hannah Arendt to speak of, I quote, the perplexities of the rights of man. And she goes further and speaks of an end of rights of men. The identification of human rights with the rights of sovereign national governments leads to the unescapable consequence that the loss of civil rights is identical with the loss of human rights. This loss, which had been programmed into the structure of human rights itself, has become a political mass phenomenon since the First World War at the latest. Laws of denaturalization and denationalization, the deprivation of civil rights, forced deportation, enforced immigration, and the refusal of the rights of asylum, all of these have been enacted by sovereign nation-states within the rights of men written, with the rights of men written into their constitutions, thereby producing millions of people who belonged to no state and had no civil rights and thus no human rights. Those robbed of their legal status were then able to be deprived of their minimal human right, the right to live, and could become subject of state-organized murder. All this, to be sure, was done according to due legal procedure, and thus, in the final instance, under the perverse sanction of the human rights themselves. Referring to rulings in France in 1915, Portugal 1916, Russia 21, Belgium 22, Italy 26, Egypt and Turkey 26, France 27, Germany 33, Arendt explains this catastrophic turn of national governments against the universalism of human rights by pointing out that a global power to guarantee these rights was lacking. Her argument implies the further explanation, however, especially in light of Marx's critique of the first human rights declarations, that this perversion is made possible by the internal structure of human rights themselves. Not only were the so-called denaturalization laws enacted by the same powers that had included human rights into their constitutions, without this contradiction causing the slightest legal or political consequence, but moreover, it was the human rights themselves that sanctioned this flagrant contradiction and that they allowed as rights of property and security for the defense against every attack and even every presumed attack upon the integrity of the private person or the nation-state. The withdrawal of civil rights, as well as the concomitant withdrawal of human rights, extending to the withdrawal of right of life itself, was legitimated and indeed legalized. This is the epitome of the structural perversion of these rights by the so-called human rights themselves. The authors of the Human Rights Charter of the United Nations from 1948 may have been the first technicians of international law to whom this horrendous paradox was clear. In the 30th and final article in the Declaration, they included the following sentence, I quote, "No determination contained within the present Declaration may be interpreted in such a way that any state, group, or person is given the right to exercise a capacity or take an action, the aim of which would be the annihilation of rights and freedoms introduced in this declaration." I repeat. No determination contained within the present declaration may be interpreted in such a way that any state, group, or person is given the right to exercise a capacity or take an action, the aim of which would be the annihilation of rights and freedoms introduced in this declaration. With this hermeneutic protection clause, the article expressly concedes that every individual human right can be used toward the annihilation of human rights, and that it is a matter of the interpretation and application of human rights alone, and thus a matter that pertains to something other than a merely legal power that keeps the double bind of legal rights from becoming suicidal. Human rights themselves cannot prevent, according to this article, their own use toward the destruction of precisely these human rights. It cannot be prevented, but it would nonetheless be wrong, according to the authors of the article, for anyone to portray the self-destruction of law as a legal occurrence. According to their internal structure, the rights of man as private rights and rights of property and protection are thus elements of the law of international civil law, in which the enemy can be declared to be a criminal, a non-human, a rogue who has come off the earth. In the concentration and extermination camps, the essential content of human rights, its antisocial and anti-human and thus suicidal content, made itself manifest. These camps are, in every meaning of the word, the end not only of human rights and thereby of rights in general, but also the end of the possibility of conceiving of what is called man within legal concepts. Four, Hannah Arendt rejects every attempt to tie hopes of correction, of an improvement in or the political surpassing of the legally codified human rights to a progress in legal culture, or to supranational powers, or to a global government. After energetically keeping her distance from the supposedly fundamental rights of freedom and justice, and following the introduction of the more concrete concepts of the rights of action and of opinion as the politically and socially decisive rights, she continues, I quote, "We became aware of the existence of a right to have rights. And that means to live in a framework where one is judged by one's actions and opinions, and a right to belong to some kind of organized community only when millions of people emerged who had lost and could not regain these rights because of the new global political situation. The trouble is that this calamity arose not from any lack of civilization, backwardness, or mere tyranny, but on the contrary, that it could not be repaired because there was no longer any uncivilized spot on the earth, because whether we like it or not, we have really started to live in one world. Only with a completely organized humanity could the loss of home and political status become identical with expulsion from humanity altogether." End of quote. These considerations, which are clearly decisive for Arendt's work, require an extended commentary. Here, only two remarks must suffice. First, the expulsion from humanity can only be understood as a legal, administrative, and political operation by which the legal logic of human rights defined as natural and private rights reveal their implications. In them, the universalist concept of the legally civilized one world is structurally laid bare and historically brought to its end. This one world is the world that can first exterminate, in every sense of the word, the one humanity, by bringing this humanity to its furthest limit, by excluding it from the limits of its own concept, and by conceptually and physically annihilating it. Thus Arendt can speak of the end of rights of men. Following this end, these rights may continue to exist and produce certain salutary effects, and indeed they still today invite and demand their deployment and further implementation. But they are unredeemable as merely national or international political rights, and this remains nevertheless as a structural and historical fact. A fact which may still be capable of bringing forth far more terrifying epochs than the one of which we would like to claim that it lies behind us.